Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Salutation to the lineage starting with Lord Sadashiva, with Adi Shankara in the middle and continuing up to my immediate teacher. Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. Salutations to God and Guru. I bow down to Govinda, whose nature is supreme bliss, who is the Sadguru, who can be known only through the realization of Vedanta, and who is beyond the reach of speech and mind. Good afternoon to everyone here in this platform. My respectful pranams to dear and revered Swami Banishanandaji Maharaj, Swami Bhashwatanandaji Maharaj, the brahmacharis, brahmacharins, inmates there in the center, and the dear friends and devotees. It's a great honor for me to be invited to speak to you all. Sometimes I follow the Germany Ashrama classes online. I'm happy that I have been given this opportunity to dwell on a few of our personal as well as fundamental Vedantic questions. In some way or other, humanity has been asking these baffling questions about the meaning of our existence and all. Let us try to make some sense out of these eternal questions. We started with the Pranam mantra, which says that it is very difficult to realize, to experience this truth by words, by our sense organs. Shankara himself in one of the verses says, Vagvaikhari Shabdachari Shastra Vyakhyana Kaushalam Vaidusham Vidusham Yadvad Tadvad Bhuktaye Natu Muktaye. Loud speeches consist of a shower of words, the skill in expounding the scriptures, and likewise erudition as well. These merely bring on a personal enjoyment to the scholar, but are no good for liberation. Swami Vivekananda says, science informs, but religion reforms. Discussion of these scriptural texts gives us the joy of scholarship, joy of text-torturing debates, can also help us to fill our stomach to some extent, but it will not bring that reformation until we start practicing it in our day-to-day activities, until we make it our own. Today's topic, 7 Eternal Questions, is based on Viveka Churamani, the crest jewel of Vedanta. Nowadays, question and answers, Swami answers, ask the Swami. We often find these kinds of videos, and they are very much in demand nowadays because it's in the form of a dialogue and it attracts the listeners rather than one-sided reflection only. We see Shankara Bhagavatpada around 1500 years back took the help of the same technique to clear the eternal doubts of the spiritual aspirants. Not only so, we shall see that he has used marvelous examples, analogies from our day-to-day life to explain intricate Vedantic truths. For example, he says how much important is the place of self-effort in our spiritual life. And he says, Rinamochana karta hatu pituhu santi sutadayaha. In the verse 51 of this book, it says, Rinamochana kartaraha pituhu sutadayaha bandhamochana kartatu swasmad anyo na kaschanaha. Swasmat anyaha natu kaschanaha. A father has his children and others to free him from his debts, but he has no one but himself to remove his bondage. We can understand the meaning of this verse. When someone is in debt, his children, his grandchildren can help him to come out of that. But one who is in bondage himself, one who is bound, he himself has to do the effort to come out of that. And beginning with this, we will directly start with the questions that the disciple had put in front of his guru. The verse 49 of Viveka Churamani puts these questions. Ko nama bandha. What is bondage, by the way? Ko nama bandha. Katham esha agataha. How has it come upon the self? Katham pratishthasya. How does it still exist? Katham vimokshaha. How does one get rid of it? Koso anatma. What is the non-self? Kah parama atma. What is the supreme being? What is and who is the Paramatman? Tayor vivekaha katham etad uchyatam. And how can we discriminate between them? So these are the questions. What is bondage, by the way? How has it come upon the self? How does it still exist? How does one get rid of it? What is the non-self? So these questions are very common. We many times dwell upon these things when we listen, when we read the scriptures. And the disciple, having come to such a competent teacher, the disciple pours out his heart, placing before him the thoughts which he has been struggling. These are deep spiritual and philosophical questions that stir every seeking mind in every part of the world. Shankara takes these questions, formulates them in a universal language, and presents them here. When the Guru hears these doubts, he is very happy because very few ask such profound questions. Most of us only ask about temporary matters, about home, family, job, income, and other perspectives. And the answers, as soon as we put the questions, it brings a turning point in the questioner's life from where his tremendous evolution begins. His mind is no more satisfied with the toys of this world. He's searching for the truth. And progress is possible only through genuine questions and thoughts, and never through complacent attitudes. Through Sri Ramakrishna's example, we can understand this very nicely. When the baby is busy playing with the toys, the mother is busy in the kitchen with her works. But when the baby is tired playing with it and it leaves everything and starts crying, then mother comes running and takes the baby in her lap. The same is with our thirst for spiritual knowledge. Shankara begins the formulation. There are 7 questions, but what is bondage was the first question. But here he starts giving the answers with the 4th one. How is one freed from bondage? And this is a very remarkable, the reason is very remarkable. How does one free himself from the bondage? The Guru takes up the 4th question asked by the disciple. How does one free from the bondage? Why did he leave out the first 3 questions and choose the 4th one first? There must be some particular reason behind this. Buddha, in one of his parables, explains a man is pierced by a poisoned arrow. His relatives summon a doctor. Now suppose the doctor, instead of treating him first, starts asking him who made the bow, what kind of arrow was used, who was the person who shot him, etc., then the man would die. When a man is mortally wounded, we first have to provide him with medical assistance and save his life. Later, when he recovers, he can be questioned about other matters. Similarly, the disciple is being burned by the flames of worldliness. In this critical condition, the first thing to do is save him from being burnt. Once saved, the other questions can be addressed. Therefore, the Guru first proceeds to show him the way to free himself from bondage, and then show him the path to liberation. And what is the way to get out of this bondage? Anyway, as revered Maharaj told, the whole book is the answer to all these questions. But I tried to select some of the most important verses. Again, I repeat, all verses are important, but according to our time and to understand the thing in a better way, I'm trying to give the essence of these verses. So verse number 69 gives the answer that mokshasya hetu prathamo nigadyate vairagyam atyantam anitya vastusu tataha samasyapi damastitiksha nyasa prasakta khila karmanam vrisham. The first step to liberation is extreme aversion to all perishable things. Vairagyam atyantam anitya vastushu. Followed by calmness, self-control, tolerance, and total renunciation of all work ordained in the scripture. The first means to liberation is dispassion, a strong spirit of aversion for all that is ephemeral. This state of mind must first be achieved by anyone who aspires to spiritual liberation. The rich societies are the most peaceless ones because they are well fed and supplied, but the problems do not end that way. They need something more. There is a void that needs to be fulfilled. This fulfillment comes only from self-knowledge, for which we have to be detached from the sensory level of life at the very outset. When I speak of dispassion, then it doesn't mean that all spiritual seekers need to renounce their houses, need to renounce their family and take up the life of sannyasa. But I feel it's very important that one should understand what is actually dispassion, vairagya. Sri Ramakrishna says, Ishware onurag ar sangsare birag. Is love towards God. Liebe zu Gott. No, that is vairagyam. Love towards God. Animals live only on the sensory plane, just like men. Live only on the sensory plane, no, but not people, the human beings. They have a higher dimension, the transcendental supersensory level. When we come to know the existence of such a dimension, the door is open for a new type of growth in us. With our effort to grow into our higher nature comes a natural and spontaneous renunciation of lower things. It is a natural consequence of a lower state to a higher one. A baby seeks applause from his parents for every act, and they applaud the baby to encourage him because the baby needs it for his growth. But if a grown-up man similarly seeks applause for his every action, that would be ridiculous. And that is what happens. There lies the problem with us, no? Every normal adult seeks applause for his action and we can never come out of this fantasy of childhood and continuously go on seeking, this kind of applauses. Every normal, we need to seek fulfillment in the higher level, and in doing so joyfully abandon the joy that comes from the childhood toys. Similarly, when the consciousness rises to a higher level, it separates from the lower levels, and that is called renunciation here. And then it is told about Shama and Dhamma, the calmness, self-control, patience, and total renunciation of the works enjoined in the scriptures. What does it actually mean when we speak of unselfish action? Swamiji's Karma Yoga, gist of Swamiji's Karma Yoga. Work and worship. First, we think like that. Work and worship. Then work as worship. We have to give it an upliftment. Look at it in a different way. Work as worship. Doing all works as worship. And work is worship. Someone asked me here, no, work is worship. That means, what do you mean to say? That only worshipping is the work, as the monks do? No, it's not like that. Work becomes worship. Whatever we do, when we do worship, we try to give the maximum attention to the Lord. We try. The same thing, if we can do practice in all our actions, that is what is wanted. The virtues mentioned in this verse, detachment, calmness, self-control, tolerance, they prepare the ground. Now that he has been endowed with these virtues, it becomes Shravana Manana Nididhyasana. Shravana Manana Nididhyasana, hearing, reflection on that, and long, constant, unbroken meditation on the truth. That gives us a push towards the experience. Shankara says, Nagachati vinapanam vyadhir aushadha shabdataha vina paroksha anubhavam brahma shabdair namuchyate. A disease does not leave off if one simply utters the name of the medicine without taking it. Similarly, without direct realization, one cannot be liberated by mere utterance of the word Brahman. People usually want to go to heaven after death, and they have many imaginary conceptions of heaven. But according to Vedanta, there is no need for heaven at all. In fact, those who fall in love with heaven are considered petty in Vedanta. Vedanta says, Ihaiva nirvana sukham samrichati. Ihaiva, here itself. The glory of the Supreme Atman is available to us right here. We can attain that supreme bliss right here. Jesus said that the kingdom of heaven is within us. We should not compare ourselves with others in this matter. We should know our strength and proceed accordingly. Then only we are practical. I always like to say, if we try to practice 5% of what we read, what we listen, and that throughout, what happens is sometimes we try to give 70, 80%, and then for the next few months, we just pull off. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat, says Gita. Even a little of this practice, we can't be Brahmagyanis, but a little of this practice can bring a lot of difference in our life, can save us from a lot of problems, miseries, ups and downs. We can keep ourselves balanced, even though we are in the midst of problems. So we move on to the fifth question. What is non-self? Anatman, no self. No? Atman, Anatman. What is Anatman? Composed of seven, the verse goes like this. Then we shall see, composed of the 7 ingredients: marrow, bones, fat, flesh, blood, skin, and cuticle, and consisting of the following limbs and their parts: legs, thighs, the chest, the physical body, Annamaya Kosha, arms, the back, the head, his body reputed to be the abode of the delusion of I and mine, is designated by the sages as the gross body. The sky, air, fire, water, and earth are subtle elements. They are united. Panchikaranam, we'll not go into that. It's not the point of discussion today, of one another and becoming gross form, the gross body. And their subtle essences form sense objects. The group of 5 such as sound, taste, sight, touch, and smell, which conduce to the happiness of the experiencer, the individual soul. A wonderful verse. You all have listened to it various times. It's an oft-quoted verse, and it has a wonderful meaning. Shabdadibhi pancha bhireva panchaha panchatvamapu swagudena vaddaha kuranga matanga patanga meena bhringaha naraha pancha bhiranchita kim. The deer, the elephant, the moth, the fish, and the black bee, these have died, being tied to one or other of the 5 senses. What we saw through their attachment. What then in the store for a man who is attached to all these 5? What happens to a man who is attached to all these 5? Deer by Shabda, sound. It's attached to the sound, and that brings its ruin. Elephant for sparsha, touch, that brings its ruin. Moth by rupa, the sight, the sense, that sense organ brings its ruin. Fish by the taste. Bee by gandha, the sense of smell. And what happens to human beings for whom all these sense organs are so strong? How careful, how alert he should be. Doshena tivra vishaya, Krishna sarpa vishadapi, visham nihanti bhoktaram, drashtaram chakshusapyaham. Sense objects are even more virulent in their evil effects than the poison of cobra. Poison kills one who takes it, but those others kill one who even looks at them through the eyes, because in the subconscious mind it precipitates, and that creates repercussions within us. So even what to see, what to talk, what to eat, eating not only through the mouth, but all the sense organs. No? Swami Vivekananda in the complete work says, have you realized that you are spirit? What you say, I do, what is meant by that? This lump of flesh called the body or the spirit, the infinite, ever blessed, effulgent, immortal. You may be the greatest philosopher, but as long as you have the idea that you are the body, you are no better than the little worm crawling under your foot. No excuse for you. So much the worse for you that you know all the philosophies and at the same time think you are the body. Body gods, no? Is that religion? That's what happens when we don't use our discrimination. We know what is right, what is wrong. Janami dharmam nachame pravritti. Janami adharmam nachame nivritti. And that happens with all of us. We know what is right, what is wrong. And when someone asked me, what is the duty? What is my duty? I don't understand. I feel our duty is, first duty is to use our power of discrimination, the knowledge we are having, no? These teachings, what we listen every now and then. And that is our duty. And that will guide us. It is like having a lot of money in the bank, but you are not able to use them. You have a lot of information stored up in your brain, but you are not using it. And that is of no use. The same thing, Sri Ramakrishna says, kites and vultures soar high. How can a man be a Pandit if his mind does not dwell on God? Such people may be scholars, Vagvaikhari, Shabdachari, Shastra, Vyakhyana, Kaushal, Vaidusham, Vidusham, Yadvat, Tadvat, Bhuktai, Natu Muktai. So such people may be scholars, but they have not developed discrimination and dispassion. Therefore, though they soar high up in the sky of thoughts, their eyes are fixed on the sensory enjoyments lying below. This is the nature of men endowed with mere scholarship. Scholarship plus discrimination and dispassion is highly recommendable. Mere scholarship has no meaning. What is needed is strong sense of dispassion from sensory enjoyments. Verse number 84. Sharira poshanarthi sanya atmanam dridikshati graham darudhiya dhritva nadim tartum sagachati. It's a very funny meaning it has. And we will laugh at it, but it is what we do. Whoever seeks to realize the self by devoting himself to the nourishment of the body proceeds to cross a river by catching hold of a crocodile catching hold of a crocodile, mistaking it for a log. Many times we hear this, no? A monk, was taking bath in the river. He was bathing. Itinerant monk, he didn't have proper woolen garment, so he saw a black thing floating on the river. He thought maybe that is a woolen blanket. He wanted to grab it and use it for the winter. So he went, he grabbed the blanket. Then he saw that he was not able to leave it because it was not a blanket, but it was a black bear. The people from the bank started shouting, leave the blanket, because you will get drowned. But he says, no, मैं तो कंबल को छोड़ दिया, कंबल मुझे नहीं छोड़ रहा है. It means I have left the blanket. Now the blanket is not leaving me. That's our condition many a times. Many a times we want to give up, but the strong addiction, our samskaras, impression, the past impressions doesn't let us go beyond this, no? But anyway, as we always, swalpam apyasya, 4%, 5%, 10%, to continue with that, no? Anyone who wants to realize the Atman and yet remains attached to the body, trying to make it fine all the time, is like a person who attempts to cross a river by mounting on a crocodile, thinking it to be a log, which actually is a crocodile, and sits on it and sets across the river. We can imagine his fate. Similarly, we are deeply attached to the body, taking care of it all the time. And at the same time, we try to cross the ocean of worldliness and achieve spiritual freedom. In such a case, we are sure to be drowned and devoured by the crocodile of the body. One who has overcome this infatuation to his body alone succeeds in setting his feet on the other shore of the worldly ocean, says Shankara. So, just to recap, we saw how to come out of the bondage. He said, what is non-self? An Atman. And then he explains that if we are attached to this Anatman, or to say the temporary, impermanent things, then we shall ruin ourselves like any other animal. He gives the examples of some of them, and he gives the dangerous consequences of attachment towards the sense objects. We move on to the sixth question. We saw how to come out of bondage. We saw what is Anatman. And now, what is Atman? Shankara doesn't keep the order of the questions, doesn't maintain the order, because he is trying to explain it step by step. We shall see. So he has taken up the fourth question first, then the fifth, and now the sixth one. What is the self? Kah Paramatma. Asti kaschit swayam nityam aham pratyaya alambanaha avasthatraya sakshi san panchakosha vilakshanaha. What is the quality of Atman? What we say, Satchidananda. So in these verses, we shall see how Shankara explains that existence, consciousness, bliss, absolute is the characteristic of this Atman. Annamaya kosha. So here, asti kaschit swayam nityam. There is some entity eternal in nature. The basis of ego sense, experience, witness to all three states, waking, dream, and deep sleep, and distinct from the five sheets, Annamaya kosha, which is the sthula sharira, dense body, gross body. In Spanish, we say cuerpo denso, so it was coming like that. It's the gross body. Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, and Vijnanamaya Kosha. These three are the consist of the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body, the sheet of the bioenergy, the mental sheet, and the intellectual sheet. And lastly, the blissful sheet, that is Anandamaya Kosha, that is the Karana Sharira. So there is some entity, eternal in nature, the basis of ego sense, experience, witness to all three states, and distinct from the five sheets. From childhood till adulthood, the I is there. There is certain reality, eternal by nature, asti kaschit swayam nityam, which does not change and is the basis of the ego sense experience. Aham pratyalambanaha. Aham pratyalambanaha. The awareness of I, which we usually have, is changing, but behind there is a constant I. The waking state I disappears when we go to sleep, and the dream I disappears when we wake up again, and both disappear when we enter deep sleep state, where we have no I awareness. The I of waking, dream, and deep sleep contradict each other, but there is an eternal I that records the experiences of all these changing eyes. And how to explain it from an illustration, we can understand it better. It's a little confusing. Two eyes, as Sri Ramakrishna says, the ripe ego and the unripe ego. Suppose a person is sitting in a room where visitors come and go. B comes and meets C. Suppose a visitor by name B comes and meets C, and then both leave. Similarly, D comes and meets E, and both leave. These visitors, B, C, D, E, have gone and come. B and C would not know when D arrived. B and C would not know when D arrived. And D and E would not know when B arrived, because D was present when B and C were there, and B was present when D and E were present. And B was not present, sorry. So actually what we find, what I want to tell is that there was one person in the room whole time, A. The person A was there always, and he alone can tell us about all the visitors who have come and gone. B, C, D, E, they all came and went. But one person was there always. The constant witness has recorded all the events in that room. And that eternal I, that is the Turiya, the fourth. Chaturtha manyate sa atma sa vigyeha. Shantam Shivam Advaitam. And its nature is ever peaceful, bliss. Shantam Shivam, auspicious. Advaitam, without the second. It's the one who knows everything what that happens in the waking state, in sleep and in deep sleep, who is aware of the presence or absence of the mind and its functions, and what is the background of the notion of egos. This is it, this I. We read in our schools that God is omniscient. What does that mean? Vedanta only answers these questions. Yes, here is this very human system. There is a divine reality that knows everything, that sees everything, and that is our true nature. That is God. That is how God is presented in the Upanishads, that omniscient I, Ahamiti. When we say God exists, does it affect God? No, because it's just a modification of our mind, a mere concept, buddhi vritti. Similarly, the statement God does not exist is also a concept, a mental modification. and concepts do not affect the Atman, which is behind all concepts and which is witness to all concepts. This is the profound discovery of the Upanishads. And another verse says, to explain Atman, Yasya sannidhi matrena deha indriya manodhiyaha vishayeshu swakiyeshu vartanta preritaiva. By whose presence the body, organs, mind and intellect maintain their respective spheres of action as servants. It's like in Kena Upanishad we find this one, no, Shrotasya Shrotram Manaso Manoyad Vachoha Vacham Sau Pranasya Prana. The Brahman is the ear of the ear, the mind of the mind, the speech of the speech, the breath of the breath. Therefore, the sage living the thought that this is connected with the organs when he dies. He leaves the body, departs from his world, renounces this world and becomes immortal. Know that Brahman is something that the mind cannot comprehend, because Brahman is what makes the mind work. It is important to know that one cannot see Brahman with the eyes, because he is the power what our eyes sees. Know that Brahman is not what one can hear with the ears, because it is never an object. When one dies, it may be like the ears, the eyes are intact, but still they don't work. The eyes cannot see, the ears cannot hear. Why? Because only the organs do not have the power to work. They need some force to function. What is that power? That is the source of all powers. What is described is Brahman or self. And this will be the last verse which we can take up today, and that is that we can't divide this Paramatma. It's indivisible. The verse number 135 gives the na jayate, no muriyate, na vardhate, na kshiyate, no vikaroti nityaha, vilyo manopi vapushya mushmin, naliyate kumbha, ivambaraha swayam. It is neither born nor dies, neither grows nor decays, nor undergoes any change, being eternal. It does not cease to exist even when this body is destroyed. Like the sky in a pot after it is broken, because it is independent. Ghatakasha, a very famous example in Vedanta. No? What is the nature of the Atman? It is neither born nor dies. Na jayate, no mriyate. It has no birth. And what has no birth cannot have death. It does not grow, na vardhate. It does not decay or reduce, na kshiyate. It does not undergo any change, na vikaroti. It is eternal, nitya. It does not cease to exist even when this body is destroyed. Vilyaman Opi, this is given, no? Vapushi amusmin naliyate. So we can understand that even when the body ceases to exist, the time of death, the Atman remains. Bodies come and go, but the Atman remains. And Shankara offers a beautiful illustration. And he says, Atman is like the sky in a pot. Even when the pot is broken, the inner sky remains because it is independent. Kumbha iva ambaram swayam. Atman or God is both transcendent and immanent. No, we can, and although immanent, it is unlimited by space and time, and therefore infinite. If it had been limited by space and time, it would have become finite. And since it is infinite, it can be both in you and in its fullness and in me. Atman partitioning is not supported. It is an indivisible entity, akhanda vastu. And space is only element in our physical world that is taken as an example of the Atman because of its characteristic of indivisibility. Space shares this unique characteristic with Atman. When we make a pot, the pot encloses some space, that is Ghatakasha. The space seems to have been trapped inside the pot, and the pot seems to have divided the space into internal and external. But has the pot really divided the space? No. We can have any number of vessels, but the space will still be undivided. We can put n number of pots. And even when we break the pots, the space remains the same. Space existed undivided when the pots existed, and space exists undivided when the pots are destroyed. The vessels break, the pots break, but the space remains the same as always. This is a wonderful illustration of the omnipresence of the Atman. Atman is the only reality that cannot be divided. When Abraham Lincoln became president of the United States, he said he had to leave his hometown of Springfield and go to Washington. He bid farewell to his people with a moving speech. He says, "Here I have lived for a quarter of a century and have passed from young to old. Now I am living, not knowing where or if I shall ever return, with a greater task than the one before me in Washington. Without the help of that divine being, I cannot succeed. With that help, I can't fail. Trusting in the one who can go with me, stay with you, and be everywhere forever, let us confidently hope that all goes well. To your care I commend you, and I hope in your prayers that you commend me. I wish you an affectionate farewell." He entrusted his people to the care of one who could go with him and yet remain with the people and be everywhere forever. This is the nature of God or Atman, one who is with us also and with all of you, and also with me, and also everywhere at the same time. Sarvatah panipadam tat, no? When we penetrate the human system, searching for the true self, we meet many pretenders to individuality. The body, the mind, the senses, the intellect, all these claim to be the self. But when we question them, we realize that they are not the self. When we go to meet the Maharaja, the king in the palace, we first meet the gatekeepers who stand at the gates on the way. Each of them beautifully dressed and adorned with a turban resembles the Raja. But when questioned, each of them reveals that he is not the Raja and directs us to go further into the inner quarters of the palace. Finally, when we meet the Maharaj, the king, all our doubts are put to rest. Similarly, in the wonderful human system, there is a true king, amongst others, who appear as the king. We have to discover it by going deeper into our psychophysical system and realizing that this is our true nature, our true being. We are the king. And ending by the song of Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, আমরা সবাই রাজা আমাদের এই রাজার রাজত্বে, নইলে মোদের রাজার সনে মিলব কি সত্ত্বে. We all are emperors in the kingdom of our emperor. How else we would be able to unite with him? আমরা যা খুশি তাই করি, তবু তার খুশিতেই চড়ি. আমরা নই বাধা নই দাসের রাজার ত্রাসের দাসত্বে. We are free to do whatever we like, although our movements guided by him. রাজার সবারে দেয় মান, সে মান আপনি ফিরে পান. মোদের খাটো করে রাখেনি কেউ কোনো অসত্যে, নইলে মোদের রাজার সাথে মিলব কি সত্ত্বে. The king pays honor to all. He is gifted in return with admiration. We are unethically discriminated by none. How else we would be able to unite with him? আমরা চলবো আপন মতে, শেষে মিলবো তারই পথে. মোরা মরব না কেউ বিফলতার বিষম আবর্তে, নইলে মোরা রাজার সাথে, নইলে মোদের রাজার সনে মিলব কি সত্ত্বে. We follow our own path, meet his mission at the end. We shall not die encircling odds of failure. How else we would be able to unite with him? So we completed the 3 questions, the first, the 4th, 5th, and the 6th questions. And we leave the other 4 for the next week. Thanking you all for accompanying me, for your patience, patient listening. Asatoma sadgamaya, tamasoma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritangamaya. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Lead us from unreal to real. Asatoma sadgamaya, tamasoma jyotirgamaya. Lead us from darkness to light. Mrityurma amritam gamaya. Lead us from death to immortality. Peace, peace, peace. Peace for everyone. Jai Ramakrishna.